AITA for going off on my parents after they make me pay for my portion of a family dinner when they paid for everybody else, despite them taking half my paycheck. I'm 17F, the middle child in my family, and honestly, I've always felt like the odd one out. I mean, I'm not the oldest like my sister Sarah, who's always been the golden child. She's off at college now, making everyone proud, just like she's supposed to. And I'm not the youngest like my little sister Emily, who's still in middle school and pretty much gets away with everything because she's the baby of the family. No, I'm just me stuck in the middle, trying to figure out where I belong, while constantly feeling like I'm just there. Growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. I remember nights when we had to make do with whatever was left in the pantry, and my parents would stay up late, whispering about bills and debts. It wasn't a secret that we were struggling, and when I turned 15, I knew I had to do something to help out. So, I got a job at a local grocery store. It wasn't anything special, just a part-time gig as a cashier, but it was something. My older sister had done the same when she was my age, and back then, our parents would take a portion of our paychecks to help keep the lights on. I didn't mind at the time because I knew it was necessary. We were all in this together, right? But things changed after Sarah left for college. Our financial situation started to improve, or at least that's what I thought. My parents stopped taking money from Sarah's paychecks once she went off to school, but for some reason, they kept taking half of mine. I asked them why, and they just brushed it off with some vague explanation about how they were my parents and they deserved it. Deserved it? What does that even mean? I'm their daughter, not their personal ATM. But what could I do? I didn't want to cause any trouble, so I just sucked it up and kept working, even though it didn't feel right. The thing is, even after giving up half my paycheck, I still had to cover my phone bill and whatever other expenses came up. And let me tell you, there wasn't much left over after that. It felt like I was working my butt off just to have a little bit of spending money, while they were taking a big chunk of what I earned for themselves. It didn't make sense, but I didn't know how to argue with them about it. They were my parents, after all. Wasn't I supposed to respect them and do what they said? But that resentment, it just kept building up inside me, day after day, week after week. Then came the night that changed everything. My parents decided to take us all out for dinner, which was a big deal because we hardly ever went out to eat. Sarah was home for the weekend, and they wanted to do something special, I guess. We went to this nice restaurant, the kind we only go to for special occasions. I was actually kind of excited because, for once, it felt like we were doing something as a family. The atmosphere was nice, and for a little while, I forgot about all the anger and frustration that had been simmering inside me. We laughed, talked, and it felt normal, like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. But then the check came. My dad picked it up, glanced at it, and then did something that completely blindsided me. He slid the bill across the table toward me and said, "You'll need to cover your part." I just stared at him, trying to process what he just said. Was he serious? This had to be a joke, right? But when I looked at his face, I realized he wasn't joking at all. He was dead serious. My parents had paid for everyone else, Sarah, Emily, even themselves, but not me. They expected me to pay for my own meal. I felt like I'd been slapped in the face. "Are you serious?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My dad didn't even flinch. He just looked at me and said, "You have a job. You can pay for yourself." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't just the fact that they wanted me to pay for my own dinner, it was the sheer unfairness of it all. They took half of my paycheck every single time I got paid, and now they wanted me to pay for my own meal while they covered everyone else's. It was like they were punishing me for no reason, just because they could. The injustice of it all hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt something snap inside me. "Why should I have to pay for my own dinner when you're already taking half of my paycheck?" I asked, my voice rising with each word. I could feel the anger bubbling up, threatening to spill over, but I didn't care anymore. I was done playing nice. My mom, who had been quiet up until now, decided to chime in. "You need to learn responsibility," she said, in that condescending tone she always used when she wanted to make me feel like a child. "It's time you started contributing more." Contributing more? How could they say that when I was already giving up half of what I earned to them? What more did they want from me? I felt the anger I'd been holding back for so long finally explode. I told them they were being ridiculous, that they were treating me like some kind of cash machine, and that it wasn't fair. I couldn't stop the words from pouring out, and before I knew it, we were in a full-blown argument, right there in the middle of the restaurant. Voices were raised, accusations were thrown, and it felt like everything I'd been bottling up for the past 2 years was spilling out in one uncontrollable torrent. I didn't care that people were staring at us, that Sarah and Emily looked like they wanted to disappear under the table. I was done pretending that everything was okay, done pretending that I could just accept the way they were treating me. And then, my dad said the words that I never thought I'd hear. "If you don't like it, you can leave." I froze. For a moment, I didn't know what to say or do. He couldn't be serious, could he? But when I looked at his face, I realized he was. He was completely serious. "Fine," I snapped back, not thinking he actually meant it. I was too angry to care. But then he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're kicked out. Pack your things and go." It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at him, trying to comprehend what he just said. My mom just sat there, silent, not even looking at me. Sarah and Emily didn't say a word. They just looked at me with wide eyes, too shocked or scared to say anything. I felt completely and utterly alone. I didn't finish my meal. I didn't say another word. I just got up and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't even know where I was going. I just had to get out of there. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened, but nothing made sense anymore. I ended up at my friend's house, and thankfully, she let me stay the night. I kept telling myself that my parents didn't mean it, that they'd cool off by the next day and everything would go back to normal. I kept hoping that maybe, just maybe, they'd realize how unfair they were being and apologize. But the next day, I got a text from my mom. It was short and cold, telling me to come pick up my things. I couldn't believe it. They were serious. They actually wanted me to leave. I felt like my whole world was crumbling around me, but I had no choice. I went back to the house, and when I got there, I saw all my stuff, everything I owned, packed up and sitting on the front porch. They didn't even have the decency to talk to me face to face. They just threw me out like I was nothing. I felt like I was in a daze as I loaded my things into my friend's car. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt numb. How could they do this to me? How could they just throw me out over a stupid argument about a dinner bill? It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. But what really pushed me over the edge was what happened next. That day, I was supposed to get my paycheck. It had already been delayed because the first one bounced, so I was counting on this one to at least have some money to survive on. But when I went to pick it up, I found out that my parents had already cashed the whole thing. Not just their usual half the whole damn paycheck. They didn't even leave me a single cent. I was beyond livid. I felt like I was going to explode. I called them, screaming at them for what they did. I told them they were greedy, that they didn't care about me, that they were treating me like a walking bank account. And you know what they said? They told me they were going to disown me. They said it like it was nothing, like I was nothing to them. After the blowout with my parents and them kicking me out, I felt completely lost. My friend's house was a safe haven, but I knew I couldn't stay there forever. My parents didn't reach out, and I wasn't about to be the first to call, but that left me with a problem: my job. I was still working at the grocery store, but I knew I couldn't keep doing that if they were just going to keep taking my money. It was bad enough they had cashed my last paycheck without my permission, leaving me completely broke. The thought of them doing it again made my blood boil. I remember sitting in my friend's bedroom, staring at my phone, the notification from my bank app taunting me with its big, fat zero balance. How could they justify what they did? I kept replaying that argument in my head, the cold way my dad told me to leave, the way my mom didn't even try to stop him. It was like I didn't matter to them anymore, like I never really mattered. One night, after another long shift at the grocery store, I made a decision. I was done letting them control me. I was done with the half paychecks, the constant guilt trips, and the feeling that I owed them something just for existing. I quit my job. It wasn't an easy decision. I needed the money. obviously, but I knew it was the right one. I figured I could find something else, something better, and in the meantime, I could look for other ways to make ends meet. Anything had to be better than working my ass off just to have it all taken away by people who didn't even care about me. I didn't tell my parents right away, but I knew it wouldn't be long before they found out. They were so used to controlling everything in my life, so I knew this would piss them off. And sure enough, a few days later, my phone rang. It was my mom. I almost didn't pick up, but something inside me made me answer. "What do you want?" I asked, not bothering to hide the bitterness in my voice. There was a pause on the other end, and then my mom started in with her usual guilt trip. "Why did you quit your job? How are you going to support yourself?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "I quit because I'm tired of you and Dad taking my money. I can't keep working just to have you guys take half of everything I make. It's not fair." My mom didn't even hesitate. "We're your parents. We sacrificed so much for you. This is how you repay us. By quitting your job and throwing it all away, you're being so ungrateful." Ungrateful. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. They always used it against me, like I owed them something just for being born. But this time, I wasn't going to let them manipulate me. "I'm not ungrateful," I shot back. "I'm just tired of being treated like a walking ATM. You guys kicked me out, remember? You took all my money and left me with nothing. And now you're mad because I'm trying to take control of my own life. How does that make any sense?" My mom's voice turned icy. "You're making a big mistake. You're going to regret this. We won't be there to bail you out when you fall flat on your face." I clenched my fist, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I don't need you to bail me out. I'm going to be fine on my own. I just need you to stay out of my life." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could almost picture my mom sitting there, fuming, trying to come up with something to say that would make me feel guilty. But I wasn't going to let her have that power over me anymore. "Fine," she finally said, her voice cold and distant. "But don't come crying to us when things don't work out." And with that, she hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling a mix of anger and relief. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but at the same time, I knew that this was it. I was really on my own now. No more safety net, no more pretending that everything was okay. It was just me, trying to figure out how to survive in a world that suddenly felt a lot bigger and scarier than it ever had before. But I was determined to make it work. I spent the next few days scouring job boards, sending out resumes, and applying for anything that looked even remotely promising. I knew I needed something better than what I'd had before, something that paid well enough to actually support me without having to rely on my parents. And after what felt like an eternity of waiting and hoping, I finally got a break. I landed an interview at a company that specialized in online customer service. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a step up from the grocery store, and the pay was significantly better. Plus, the hours were flexible, which meant I could keep looking for something else if I needed to. The interview went well, better than I expected, and a few days later, I got the call. I'd been hired. The relief I felt was overwhelming. I wasn't completely out of the woods yet, but at least now I had a job, a real job, with real paychecks that would actually go to me, and not into my parents' pockets. With the new job secured, I knew the next step was finding a place of my own. My friend had been incredibly generous, letting me crash at her place for so long, but I couldn't impose on her forever. I needed my own space, a place where I could finally start building my life without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next blow would come from my parents. I started looking at apartments, keeping in mind that my budget was still pretty tight. I didn't need anything fancy, just a place where I could sleep, cook, and feel safe. After a lot of searching and a few disappointments, I finally found a small one-bedroom apartment that was perfect. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it was affordable, and most importantly, it was mine. I signed the lease and moved in a week later. Standing in that empty apartment for the first time, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was proud of myself for getting this far, for proving that I could make it on my own. But I was also scared of what the future held, scared of making mistakes, scared of failing. But I knew I couldn't let that fear control me. I'd made it this far, and I wasn't going to let anything or anyone hold me back now. The first few weeks were tough, adjusting to my new job, figuring out how to manage my own place, and dealing with the loneliness that came with living on my own for the first time. It was a lot to handle. The job turned out to be better than I expected. The work was challenging at times, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. The pay was good, and I even started picking up extra shifts when I could. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. My parents tried to reach out a few more times, mostly my mom, sending me guilt-ridden texts about how I was abandoning the family, how they were worried about me, and how I needed to come home. I ignored most of them, but every now and then, I'd reply with a short, polite message just to keep the peace. I wasn't ready to cut them off completely, but I also wasn't about to let them back into my life in the same way they'd been before. They needed to understand that I was no longer their little girl who they could control. One night, I got a particularly nasty text from my dad. He accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, of turning my back on the people who had raised me and sacrificed so much for me. He said I was making a huge mistake and that I'd come crawling back to them eventually, begging for forgiveness. I stared at the screen, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. It hurt to see those words from him, but I knew they were just another attempt to manipulate me, to make me doubt myself. I wasn't going to let that happen. My life started to feel more stable. I had settled into my routine with the new job, and although it wasn't my dream career, it provided me with the stability I needed. I was earning more than I ever had before, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about my parents swooping in and taking a chunk of my paycheck. Every dollar I earned was mine, and that simple fact gave me a sense of freedom I hadn't realized I was missing. But as much as I was enjoying my newfound independence, my parents weren't completely out of the picture. My mom continued to send sporadic messages, sometimes checking in, other times reminding me of how I was missing out on family events. She never outright apologized for what had happened, but there was an underlying tone of regret in her words. My dad, on the other hand, kept his distance for a while after that last nasty text, which was honestly a relief. Then, something strange happened. I started getting messages from my mom that felt different, softer, more pleading than before. She would ask how I was doing, tell me they missed me, and even started asking if I'd consider coming over for dinner. At first, I brushed it off as another attempt to lure me back into their control, but then the messages became more frequent, more desperate. One day, I got a call from my dad. I hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what to expect. His voice was calm, almost subdued, as he asked how I was doing. We talked about work, my apartment, and other surface-level things before he finally broached the subject I knew was coming. "We miss you," he said, his voice thick with something I couldn't quite place. "Your mom and I. We've been thinking a lot about what happened, and we realize we made some mistakes." I was silent, not sure how to respond. This was the man who had kicked me out of the house without a second thought, who had taken my entire paycheck and called me ungrateful when I stood up for myself. Hearing him admit to making mistakes felt surreal. He continued, "We're sorry for how we treated you. We never should have put that kind of pressure on you, and we definitely shouldn't have taken your money. We were wrong, and we just want you to come back home. We can work things out, start fresh." His words hung in the air, and I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me had been waiting to hear those words for months, hoping that my parents would finally see how unfair they had been. But another part of me was skeptical, wondering if this was just another tactic to get me back under their control now that I was doing better for myself. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why now?" I asked. "Why are you saying this now, after everything that happened?" There was a pause on the other end of the line before my dad spoke again, his voice softer. "We've been talking a lot, your mom and I. We realized that we've been too hard on you, that we pushed you away when we should have been supporting you. And, well, we've heard that you're doing well, that you've got a good job and your own place. We're proud of you, but we also miss having you around. We just want you to come home." The words "we're proud of you" hit me harder than I expected. My parents had never been the type to give out praise easily, and hearing those words now, after everything, made my heart ache. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind that questioned their motives. Were they really proud of me, or were they just trying to get back into my life now that I was more successful? And if I went back, would things really be different? Or would I just end up in the same toxic cycle all over again? I told my dad I needed time to think and hung up the phone, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. I wanted to believe that my parents were sincere, that they had genuinely realized their mistakes and wanted to make things right. But I also knew that going back to them meant risking everything I had worked so hard to build: my independence, my freedom, my sense of self. So, AITA for going off on my parents, or did I have every right to stand up for myself, even if it cost me everything?